On December 19, 1997, James Cameron's Titanic premiered, and the world was submerged in a cinematic experience unlike any other. It wasn't just a film, it was a global phenomenon. Theaters were filled with spellbound audiences, the sound of collective gasps and stifled sobs echoing in the dark. As the credits rolled, millions of people walked out into the night, their faces streaked with tears, their minds reeling from the emotional vortex they had just witnessed. They were united by a shared sense of awe, heartbreak, and one persistent, whispered question: why did Jack have to die? The final moments of the film are etched into our collective memory. We see old Rose, her face a beautiful map of a life fully lived, standing on the stern of the treasure hunter's vessel. The wind whips through her white hair as she clutches the heart of the ocean, the magnificent blue diamond that has been the object of a modern-day quest. With a quiet, determined resolve, she lets it slip from her hand, a final offering to the deep where her heart has remained for over 80 years. The screen fades to black, leaving a wake of profound questions. Could Jack have survived the freezing Atlantic? Was there ever a real Rose? What is the deeper truth behind that gut-wrenching, unforgettable ending? The debate raged in school hallways, office break rooms, and online forums for years. It became a cultural touchstone, a shorthand for tragic romance and noble sacrifice. But what if the ending we all saw, the one that broke the world's heart, was not the only one conceived? What if the final poetic scene was itself a choice, born from a web of real history, lost love, and deadly mistakes that are even more compelling than the fiction they inspired? This is the story behind the story. It's a journey back in time, not just to the decks of the ill-fated liner, but into the creative crucible where history and Hollywood converged. We will uncover the real-life blunders that sealed the ship's fate, meet the souls who may have inspired Jack and Rose, and dissect the artistic choices that led to one of the most powerful endings in cinema history. Prepare to go deeper than the wreck, beyond the legend, and into the hidden secrets behind Titanic's ending, both in the unforgiving waters of the North Atlantic and in the mind of the man who brought it to the screen. It was a day of pomp, promise, and palpable excitement. On April 10, 1912, the Royal Mail steamer Titanic stood proudly at the docks of Southampton, England, a veritable floating palace of steel and rivets. She was the largest man-made moving object in the world, a marvel of modern engineering and a symbol of the unbridled optimism of the Edwardian era. The newspapers had dubbed her unsinkable, a testament to her advanced safety features, including 16 watertight compartments that could be sealed off in an emergency. To her creators and her passengers, she was more than a ship. She was a declaration of humanity's triumph over nature. On board, a microcosm of society was assembling. The ship carried over 2,200 souls, a dramatic cross-section of the rigid class structure of the time. In the opulent first-class suites, the titans of industry, aristocracy, and finance settled in for a luxurious 6-day crossing. Men like John Jacob Astor IV, one of the richest men in the world, and Benjamin Guggenheim, the mining heir, strolled the promenade decks, their presence a testament to the ship's prestige. They were the masters of the universe of their day, their world one of champagne, fine cigars, and effortless power. Far below, in the cramped and modest third-class cabins, a different kind of passenger dreamed of the future. Thousands of immigrants from across Europe, Irish, Swedish, Italian, and Slavic, had scraped together everything they owned for a one-way ticket to America. They were not seeking luxury, they were seeking a new life, a chance to escape poverty and persecution for the promise of freedom and opportunity. Their hopes and dreams were packed into worn suitcases, their hearts filled with a mixture of fear and exhilarating anticipation. Between these two worlds was the second class, a comfortable but less ostentatious realm of professionals, clergy, and middle-class families. They were a bridge between the gilded world above and the striving world below, a representation of the era's growing bourgeoisie. But behind the glamour and the carefully delineated social strata, a more complex reality simmered. There were secret relationships, like that of the wealthy married Colonel Astor and his new, much younger and pregnant wife Madeline, whose union had caused a scandal. There were professional rivalries and immense pressures, particularly on Captain Edward Smith, a veteran mariner on his final voyage, and J. Bruce Ismay, the chairman of the White Star Line, who was aboard to witness his creation's triumphant debut. Ismay, it was later suggested, subtly pushed Captain Smith to increase the ship's speed, perhaps hoping to make headlines with an early arrival in New York. This blend of human ambition, pride, and arrogance was as much a part of the ship's cargo as the fine china and expensive wine. For 4 days, the Titanic sailed westward, a majestic queen gliding through calm, unusually mild seas. The passengers settled into a routine of promenading, dining, and socializing. The wireless operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, were inundated with personal messages from the wealthy passengers, trivial greetings and stock market updates that took precedence over the handful of ice warnings trickling in from other ships in the area. The warnings were noted, but not with the urgency they demanded. The ship was, after all, unsinkable. The very idea of a threat seemed remote, almost impertinent. Then came the night of April 14th. The sea was unnervingly still, like a sheet of black glass, and the air was bitingly cold. The moon was absent, leaving the ocean in an inky darkness that swallowed the horizon. At 11:40 p.m., in the crow's nest high above the deck, a lookout frantically rang the warning bell 3 times and telephoned the bridge. "Iceberg right ahead." The unthinkable had happened. Despite a swift maneuver to port, the colossal liner's starboard side scraped along the submerged spur of a massive iceberg. The impact was deceptively gentle. Many passengers slept through it, while others described it as a faint shudder, a slight jarring sensation. But below the waterline, the damage was catastrophic. The iceberg had punched and buckled the steel plates along a 300-foot stretch, breaching 5 of the 16 watertight compartments. The ship was designed to stay afloat with 4 compartments flooded, not 5. The unsinkable ship was mortally wounded. Her fate was sealed. Within a mere 2 hours and 40 minutes, the grandest vessel ever built would plunge 2.5 miles to the bottom of the Atlantic, taking with her over 1,500 souls. The world would awaken to a tragedy so immense it would forever alter the course of maritime law and shatter the technological hubris of an entire generation. But the seeds of this disaster, the chain of events that led to this horrific ending, were sown long before the iceberg was ever sighted. They began with a simple, almost laughably mundane mistake: one tiny missing key. To understand the tragedy of the Titanic, One must look beyond the iceberg and into the series of small, seemingly insignificant human errors that compounded into an unavoidable catastrophe. At the heart of this chain of failure lies the story of a man named David Blair and the key he carried in his pocket. Blair was a second officer with the White Star Line, originally assigned to the Titanic for its maiden voyage. He had participated in the sea trials and was familiar with the ship's layout and equipment. However, in a last-minute crew reshuffle just before the ship sailed from Southampton, Blair was reassigned to a sister ship. In his haste to disembark, he made a critical oversight. He forgot to hand over the key to the ship's crow's nest telephone locker. Inside that locker was a pair of binoculars, the standard issue for the ship's lookouts. This left the men stationed in the crow's nest, including Frederick Fleet, the man who would ultimately spot the fatal iceberg, without a crucial tool for their job. They were forced to rely on the naked eye to scan the vast, dark expanse of the North Atlantic. On the night of April 14th, the conditions for spotting an iceberg were treacherous. The sea was unusually calm, meaning there were no waves breaking against the base of the berg, which would have created a telltale line of white foam. The sky was moonless, plunging the horizon into an impenetrable blackness. In these conditions, binoculars would have been indispensable, allowing the lookouts to magnify any distant shape and discern its nature far sooner. At his subsequent inquiry, Frederick Fleet was asked directly about the binoculars. His testimony was chilling in its simplicity and its implications. When a commissioner asked him what difference the glasses would have made, Fleet replied with unwavering certainty, "We could have seen it a bit sooner." Asked how much sooner, he said, "Enough to get out of the way." Historians and maritime experts have debated this point for over a century, but the consensus largely supports Fleet's assertion. A few precious minutes, perhaps even just one, of extra warning could have changed everything. It would have given First Officer William Murdoch more time to assess the situation and execute a more effective maneuver. With sufficient warning, the ship might have been able to steer clear of the iceberg entirely. Even a head-on collision, while devastating, would likely have been more survivable, as it would have crumpled the bow and flooded only the first 2 or 3 compartments, a scenario the ship was designed to withstand. The glancing blow along the starboard side was the worst possible outcome, a fatal zipper-like tear that doomed the vessel. The absence of the binoculars was not just an unfortunate accident. It was a symptom of a larger problem, a pervasive sense of complacency and arrogance that permeated the entire operation. The ship was unsinkable, so the thinking went, and therefore the meticulous attention to safety protocols could be relaxed. The ice warnings were not given top priority. The lifeboat drill scheduled for that very day was cancelled. The ship was traveling at a brisk 22 knots, nearly full speed, through a known ice field. Each of these decisions, combined with the missing key, created a perfect storm of negligence. This single human error, a moment of forgetfulness in the hustle and bustle of departure, may have sealed the fate of 1,500 souls. It set in motion the final tragic act of the drama, creating the very circumstances of chaos, desperation, and sacrifice that James Cameron would later capture on screen. The missing key didn't just lock away a pair of binoculars, it locked the Titanic onto its collision course with destiny, and in doing so, laid the historical groundwork for the story of a young artist who would have to make the ultimate sacrifice in the freezing water. A man who, in the real world, was never supposed to exist. Jack Dawson. The name itself evokes a powerful image. A charming, roguish, and impossibly handsome young artist with a sketchbook full of dreams and a heart full of love. He is the embodiment of freedom, a third-class passenger who wins his ticket in a lucky hand of poker and finds a love for the ages in the gilded cage of first class. Leonardo DiCaprio's portrayal of Jack made him a global icon, the romantic hero of a generation. He was passionate, selfless, and ultimately tragic. But was he real? In the strictest historical sense, no. A thorough search of the Titanic's passenger and crew manifests reveals no one named Jack Dawson. He was a complete fabrication, a character created by James Cameron to serve as the film's emotional anchor and to provide a bridge between the ship's disparate social worlds. Cameron needed a character who could move freely between the boiler rooms and the grand staircase, an outsider who could see the opulence of first class with fresh eyes and expose its suffocating hypocrisy. Jack, the penniless artist, was the perfect vehicle for this narrative. However, the story of Jack Dawson takes a strange and eerie turn after the film's release. As Titanic mania swept the globe, fans and amateur historians began their own investigations, poring over records and visiting memorial sites. It was then that a discovery was made in the Fairview Lawn Cemetery in Halifax, Nova Scotia, one of the primary burial grounds for victims of the disaster whose bodies were recovered from the sea. There, among the rows of granite headstones, was a small, unassuming marker that read, J. Dawson. The grave belonged to Joseph Dawson, a 23-year-old man from Dublin, Ireland. He was not a wandering artist from Wisconsin. He was a coal trimmer or black gang crewman who worked in the scorching heat of the ship's boiler rooms, shoveling coal to feed the massive engines. His job was one of the toughest and lowest paying on the ship. He died in the sinking, and his body, number 227, was recovered by the cable ship Mackay Bennett. James Cameron has stated repeatedly that this was a complete and utter coincidence. He had no knowledge of Joseph Dawson when he wrote the screenplay. He chose the name Jack Dawson because he liked its simple working-class sound. Yet, the coincidence is so uncanny that it feels like a whisper from the past, a strange echo across the decades. For fans of the film, this discovery was electrifying. The grave of J. Dawson became an instant shrine. Pilgrims from all over the world flocked to Halifax to leave flowers, movie ticket stubs, and heartfelt letters at his headstone, blurring the line between the fictional hero and the real man who had shared his name. The cemetery, once a quiet place of historical remembrance, became a tourist attraction. The real Joseph Dawson, a humble laborer who had been a footnote in the grand tragedy, was posthumously transformed into the romantic icon from the movie. Was it fate? Or was it something deeper, a case of life imitating art, or perhaps art unknowingly tapping into a current of historical truth? Cameron himself leans towards a more symbolic interpretation. He believes that Jack Dawson was never meant to be a specific person. Instead, he was an archetype, a symbol of the countless young, hopeful lives that were extinguished that night. He represents the third-class passengers, the dreamers, the anonymous masses whose stories were largely lost to history, overshadowed by the deaths of the famous and wealthy. Jack embodies youth, love, and the ephemeral, breathtaking beauty of a life lived to the fullest, however brief. His sacrifice is not just about saving one person. It is about the value of a life unlived, the potential that was lost in the icy waters. In this sense, it doesn't matter if Jack Dawson was real. His emotional truth, his symbolic weight, is what makes his death so profound and so meaningful beyond the simple mechanics of survival. He is the unknown soldier of the Titanic tragedy, and in his fictional story, we find a way to mourn for all the real Joseph Dawsons who went down with the ship. Just as Jack Dawson was a symbolic creation, Rose DeWitt Bukater, the fiery high society girl who yearns for freedom, never walked the decks of the Titanic. There was number 17-year-old Philadelphian debutante engaged to a cruel steel heir, no one who left a scandalous nude portrait of herself wearing a priceless diamond. Rose, in her entirety, is a product of James Cameron's imagination. And yet, her soul, her spirit of rebellion, and her passionate, artistic heart were directly inspired by a real and truly remarkable woman, Beatrice Wood. Beatrice Wood was not on the Titanic, but her life story runs on a parallel track to Rose's, marked by the same defiance of convention and the same search for authentic experience. Born in 1893 to a wealthy, socially prominent family in San Francisco, Beatrice was groomed from a young age for a life of privilege and propriety. Just like Rose, she was expected to marry well, manage a household, and take her place among the elite. But Beatrice had other plans. She was a born rebel, an artist with a restless spirit who found the gilded cage of high society to be suffocating. She rejected her family's expectations, fleeing to Paris to pursue her passion for art and theater. There, she fell in with the avant-garde Dada movement, befriending iconic artists like Marcel Duchamp and Francis Picabia. She lived a bohemian life, filled with intellectual fervor, artistic creation, and romantic entanglements that would have scandalized her parents. She was, in her own words, the mama of Dada. Like Rose, Beatrice experienced a great life-altering love with a man who was considered unsuitable. She fell deeply for a struggling scientist and intellectual, a man who opened her mind to new ideas and passions. Their love was intense and transformative, but it was not destined to last. He left her, a heartbreak that she carried with her for the rest of her life. This experience of a profound lost love became a central pillar of her personal mythology, much as Jack's memory became the cornerstone of Rose's long life. James Cameron encountered Beatrice Wood's story while in the early stages of writing the Titanic screenplay. He read her witty and candid autobiography, I Shock Myself, and was immediately captivated. He saw in Beatrice the perfect template for his heroine. Here was a woman who had lived through the same era as the Titanic, who came from the same privileged background, but who possessed an indomitable, modern spirit. He even met the woman herself. At the time, Beatrice was over 100 years old, a celebrated ceramicist living in Ojai, California, still full of the same fiery wit and rebellious charm that had defined her youth. Cameron was so inspired that he wove elements of Beatrice's life and personality directly into Rose. Rose's interest in modern art, her appreciation for Picasso and Monet, which her fiancé Cal dismisses as finger painting, is a direct nod to Beatrice's own life in the heart of the European art world. Rose's ultimate journey of self-discovery, her decision to break free from her predestined path and live a life of adventure and independence, is a mirror of Beatrice's own. Beatrice would live to be 105 years old, passing away in 1998, just a few months after the film's premiere. She never married her great love, the man who left her so early in her life. But she never forgot him. She built a full, vibrant, and independent life on her own terms, becoming a renowned artist and an icon of creative freedom. Like Rose, she outlived her great love, but she honored his memory by living the life he had inspired her to seek. She proved that a heart can go on not just by surviving but by truly living. In Beatrice Wood, James Cameron found the soul of Rose DeWitt Bukater, and in doing so, he gave his fictional heroine a powerful real-world authenticity. It is perhaps the single most debated scene in modern film history. The image is seared into our minds. The great ship has sunk and the dark, placid water is a graveyard of frozen bodies. In the midst of the horror, Rose DeWitt Bukater lies shivering on a large, ornate piece of wooden debris, a door or a piece of paneling from the first-class lounge. Clinging to its edge, his body submerged in the -2 degrees Celsius 28 degrees Fahrenheit water, is Jack Dawson. His face is pale, his words are slowing, and he is making the ultimate sacrifice to ensure her survival. "You're going to get out of here," he tells her. "You're going to go on and you're going to make lots of babies. You're going to die an old lady warm in her bed." For over 2 decades, audiences have screamed at the screen, "Move over. There's plenty of room." The door debate has spawned countless memes, internet arguments, and even scientific inquiries. The central question is simple. Could Jack have fit on the door with Rose and survived? The question became so persistent that in 2012, for the 15th anniversary of the film, James Cameron himself decided to put it to the test. He collaborated with the popular science show Mythbusters for a special episode dedicated to solving the mystery once and for all. The hosts, Adam Savage and Jamie Hyneman, meticulously recreated the scene. They built a replica of the wooden panel, wore period-appropriate clothing, and subjected themselves to freezing water, albeit with safety precautions. Their initial findings seemed to confirm what fans had long suspected. Yes, there was physically enough space on the board for both of them. They were able to get both of their bodies, playing the roles of Jack and Rose, out of the water and onto the raft. However, the added weight caused the board to sink lower into the water, leaving them partially submerged. While it was better than being fully in the water, their chances of surviving for an hour until rescue arrived were still slim. But then they made a crucial discovery. In the film, Rose is wearing a life vest. The Mythbusters team realized that if they had taken Rose's life vest off and tied it underneath the wooden panel, it would have provided just enough extra buoyancy to lift the board higher out of the water, keeping both of their bodies almost completely dry. Their conclusion was definitive. From a purely scientific standpoint, yes, Jack could have survived. When presented with these findings, James Cameron laughed. He acknowledged the scientific validity of their solution but offered a response that cut to the heart of storytelling. "The script says Jack dies. He has to die," Cameron explained. "So maybe we screwed up and the board should have been a little bit smaller, but the dude's going down." His point was that the question of survival was never about physics. It was about meaning. Titanic is not a documentary about hypothermia. It is a romance, a tragedy, a story built on the themes of love and sacrifice. Jack's death is the narrative and emotional climax of the entire film. It is the ultimate expression of his love for Rose. He doesn't just save her life in that moment, he gives her a life. His death is the price of her freedom. By sacrificing himself, he liberates her from Cal, from her family, from the suffocating world she was destined for. He dies so that she can truly live, not just survive. The story works because of this sacrifice. If Jack had survived, the ending would have been entirely different. It would have been a simple adventure story, a tale of two plucky young lovers who beat the odds. It would have been satisfying, perhaps, but it would not have been profound. The tragic ending is what elevates the story to the level of myth. Jack's death is what makes their brief love affair eternal. It freezes it in time, perfect and untarnished by the compromises and complexities of a long life together. So, could Jack have survived? The scientist says yes. The artist says no. And it is the artist's vision that has resonated so powerfully for so long. Jack had to die because his death wasn't an accident. It was his purpose. It was the final, perfect brushstroke in the masterpiece of the life he helped Rose create. For a story as meticulously crafted as Titanic, it's hard to imagine it ending any other way. The quiet, poetic, and deeply personal moment of old Rose at the stern of the Keldysh, her secret communion with the past, feels like the only possible conclusion. It's a scene of profound emotional resonance, allowing the audience to share in her private act of remembrance and letting go. But it wasn't the only ending that was filmed. Most fans are unaware that James Cameron shot a completely different, much more confrontational version of the final scene. This alternate ending, which was included on later DVD and Blu-ray releases, changes the tone and the meaning of the film's conclusion in a dramatic way. The scene begins similarly, with old Rose making her way to the stern of the ship, clutching the heart of the ocean. But just as she is about to toss the priceless diamond into the sea, she is caught. Her granddaughter, Lizzie, and the treasure hunter, Brock Lovett, spot her and rush to her side, thinking the elderly woman is about to jump overboard. "Don't do that," Brock yells, his face a mask of panic and greed. He sees the magnificent diamond in her hand, the object of his obsessive multi-million-dollar quest, dangling over the abyss. What follows is a tense standoff. Rose allows Brock to hold the diamond for a moment, to feel its weight and its history in his hand. "You look for treasure in the wrong place, Mr. Lovett," she tells him gently. "Only life is priceless and making each day count." She then delivers a speech that explicitly spells out the film's theme. She talks about how she came to realize that the real treasure was not the diamond, but the life she had lived and the memory of Jack. She says, "It's just a thing. The memory of Jack is what's real." Brock, who has spent years and a fortune chasing this thing, is momentarily stunned. He looks from the diamond to Rose, and a slow smile spreads across his face. He laughs, not in triumph, but in a moment of sudden, life-altering epiphany. He understands. He lets go of his obsession. "I don't know what to say to a woman who tries to jump off the Titanic and then jumps back on," he says, referencing Jack's line to Rose earlier in the film. Rose then takes the diamond back and, with a playful oops, flings it into the ocean. Brock's sidekick Lewis rushes to the railing in disbelief and screams, "That really sucks, lady." But Brock just laughs and asks Lizzie to dance, his life seemingly changed for the better. When this version was shown to test audiences, the reaction was overwhelmingly negative. They hated it. The scene was seen as clumsy, preachy, and emotionally jarring. It broke the spell that the rest of the film had so carefully woven. Instead of a private, poignant moment of reflection for Rose, the ending became about Brock Lovett's character arc. It externalized Rose's internal journey, forcing her to explain the film's message out loud, robbing the audience of the chance to feel it for themselves. The mystery, the poetry, and the raw emotion of her solitary act were all sacrificed for a tidy Hollywood-style resolution for the treasure hunter. Cameron, a shrewd filmmaker who understands the power of audience emotion, wisely listened to the feedback. He cut the scene, opting for the quiet, ambiguous, and ultimately far more powerful ending that we all know. In the final version, Rose's secret remains hers. We are privileged witnesses to her final goodbye, but we are not part of a confrontation. The focus remains squarely on her love for Jack, and on the promise she kept. By deleting the alternate ending, Cameron preserved the integrity of his story, allowing Rose's memory to be the real treasure, not just for her, but for us as well. To argue about the physics of the floating door is to miss the point entirely. Jack's death is not a plot hole, it is the very heart of the film. It is the narrative anchor, the thematic core, and the emotional cataclysm that gives the entire story its enduring power. His death is more than a tragedy, it is a profound and necessary symbol. Jack Dawson, from the moment he appears on screen, represents something that Rose has never known: freedom. He is a man untethered by social class, wealth, or expectation. He lives for the moment, for his art, for the thrill of the unknown. He is everything her world is not. He is the rebellion she craves, the life force that reawakens her own dormant spirit. When he teaches her to spit like a man, or encourages her to stand on the prow of the ship with her arms outstretched, he is not just teaching her actions, he is teaching her a new way of being. His death is the ultimate act of this liberation. It is the final, irreversible severing of Rose's ties to her old life. If Jack had survived, the story would have likely ended with them together, but still fighting against the rigid structures of her world. Her family and Cal would have pursued them, and their life would have been a struggle. But by dying, Jack gives her a clean break. He becomes a martyr for her freedom. His sacrifice is so absolute, so pure, that it becomes the foundational myth of her new life. She cannot go back to her old world because to do so would be to betray his memory. Rose's long and full life, which we see in the photographs by her bedside in the film's final moments, is the true legacy of Jack's love. She rides horses on the beach, she becomes a pilot and flies planes, she travels the world, she has a family, she does everything she told him she would. She lives not just for herself but for him too. She lives the life of adventure he showed her was possible. His death is the catalyst for her entire existence. It is not the end of their love story, it is the beginning of its most important chapter. Furthermore, Jack's death speaks to a universal truth about love and memory. Some loves are not meant to last a lifetime, but their impact is eternal. Their brevity makes them more potent, more perfect. Jack and Rose's love affair lasts only a few days, but it is a concentrated, explosive force that redefines her world. By dying at the peak of their passion, Jack is forever frozen in her memory as the perfect, selfless hero. Their love is never tarnished by the mundane realities of everyday life, by arguments or illness or the slow erosion of time. It remains a perfect, shining ideal. His death reminds us that the measure of a love is not its duration but its depth. It is a testament to the idea that a person can enter our lives for a fleeting moment and yet change our trajectory forever. Jack's sacrifice is what makes the story resonate on a mythological level. It transforms a simple romance into an epic of love, loss, and redemption. He had to die not because there wasn't enough room on the door, but because his death was the only thing that could truly set Rose free. The Titanic was more than just a ship. It was a monument to an age of technological certainty, rigid social order, and a belief in man's dominion over the natural world. Its sinking was more than just a maritime disaster. It was a shattering blow to that certainty. It was a stark and brutal reminder of human fallibility, the tragic consequences of ambition mixed with arrogance. The ending of James Cameron's film, in its quiet sorrow and profound sense of loss, perfectly reflects the real-life legacy of the disaster. The story is not just about a shipwreck. It is about the human stories that were cut short, the futures that were stolen, and the love that was lost in the icy depths. The film's ending, with its focus on memory and the enduring power of a promise, mirrors the way the world has remembered the Titanic. For over a century, we have been captivated by the stories of the people on board. We are drawn to the unfinished narratives, the immigrant families who never reached the shores of their new home, the honeymooning couples whose life together had just begun, the children who never had a chance to grow up. The ship itself is a symbol of lost chances and what might have been. Jack and Rose may be fictional, but their story is a vessel for the thousands of real ones that were lost that night. Their love story, so intense and so tragically brief, gives a human face to the overwhelming statistics. It allows us to feel the scale of the loss in a personal, intimate way. When we mourn for Jack, we are, in a sense, mourning for all the passengers and crew who perished. We are mourning the real-life loves that were torn apart, the goodbyes that were never said, and the promises that were broken by the unforgiving sea. The film's final sequence, where the camera glides through the sunken wreck, transforming the decaying ship back into its original splendor, is a powerful metaphor for the act of remembrance. It shows us that even in the face of total destruction, the human spirit, through memory and storytelling, can resurrect the past. The people are gone, but their stories live on. The ship is a ruin, but in our collective imagination, it sails on, forever grand and forever tragic. The real legacy of the Titanic is not just the changes in maritime safety regulations or the scientific discoveries made from exploring the wreck. Its true legacy lies in the enduring human questions it forces us to confront. Questions about class, about courage, about hubris, and about the fragility of life. The movie's ending, with its blend of heartbreak and hope, captures this legacy perfectly. It acknowledges the finality of death while celebrating the immortality of love and memory. The ship went down, but the stories, both real and imagined, continue to surface as powerful and as moving as ever. More than a century after the real ship sank and decades after the film's premiere, the ending of Titanic continues to haunt us. It endures not just as a piece of cinematic history, but as a cultural touchstone that taps into something deep and universal within the human experience. Why does this story, and particularly its conclusion, hold such a powerful grip on our collective psyche? It is because, at its core, Titanic is a story about the fundamental forces that shape our lives. We all fear loss. We have all experienced or will experience the pain of saying goodbye to someone we love. The final scene between Jack and Rose in the freezing water is a distillation of this universal fear. It is a moment of ultimate helplessness in the face of an indifferent universe, a moment where love is the only thing left, and even that cannot conquer the physical reality of death. Conversely, we all crave love. We all yearn for a connection so profound that it transcends time and circumstance. The love between Jack and Rose, forged in a matter of days, is the romantic ideal. It is a love that is pure, all-consuming, and transformative. It reminds us of the potential for human connection, the idea that one person can see us, understand us, and change us for the better. And finally, we all wonder what might have been. The story is a grand meditation on fate and chance, on the small moments that can alter the course of a life. The missing key, the canceled lifeboat drill, the decision to go to a party in third class. These are the what-ifs that the story is built upon. Rose's long life is a testament to the promise she kept, but it is also haunted by the ghost of the life she could have had with Jack. The ending leaves us with a bittersweet ache, a sense of both fulfillment and profound absence. In the end, the ship went down, but the story never did. It lives on in our hearts and minds because it speaks to our deepest emotions. It is a story about the tragedy of death and the triumph of a life well lived. It is about a love that was lost to the sea, but a promise that was kept for a lifetime. Jack's last words to Rose were not just a plea, they were a charge, a sacred vow that she carried with her for 84 years. You must promise me that you'll survive, that you won't give up, no matter what happens, no matter how hopeless. Promise me now, Rose, and never let go of that promise. Rose kept it, and in a way so do we. We keep the promise every time we watch the film, every time we feel that familiar lump in our throat, every time we remember the boy who won a ticket on a ship of dreams and taught a girl in a gilded cage how to fly. We never let go.